Hello and welcome to the Tabletop Games blog topic discussion.
Climbing High, From Scout to Odin. I'm a big fan of card games. Having grown up in Germany, a deck of cards was usually not far away. Playing trick-taking games was part of my youth, whether with a family or friends. I love cards in general, and my love was rekindled when I was introduced to the modern hobby, with games such as Citadels or Love Letter. I also found many new trick-taking games, but a genre that was new to me was so-called ladder climbing games. In this article, I want to look at these fascinating games in more detail. Ladder climbing games are all about being the first player to have no cards in your hand, which makes them also part of the genre of shedding games. But that's not what I want to talk about here. What makes a ladder climbing game is that every player has to put down cards that are of a higher value in some shape or form. Often these games are about playing sets or sequences of cards, such as 3 green cards or cards numbered 2, 3 and 4. A higher value set or sequence is usually one that has more cards in it, or cards with high numbers. Each game will have its own rules as to what defines higher value. It feels like you're constantly trying to outbid the other players. As the sets and sequences grow, it gets harder and harder to play something of higher value. Every time you manage to play a bigger set or longer sequence, you secretly hope you've won, which creates tension. So when someone else somehow manages to go even higher, the tension is released, and that's one of the reasons why these games are so exciting. Ladder climbing games are almost like games of poker, except that you're not playing for money, even though I'm sure you could. You know what cards you have, and as more cards are played, you can gauge what others might have. There's never perfect information, but if you're good at keeping track of key cards, you can do quite well. There's also a certain bluffing element in these games, when you pretend to have bad cards and then surprise everyone by emptying your hand in one fell swoop. The first ladder climbing game I played was the wonderful Scout from Odin games. It's possibly one of the more involved games in this genre I've played. While in a lot of ladder climbing games, you are allowed to sort your hand of cards however you like, and combine cards as you want. In Scout, you have a fixed hand of cards. You can't select different cards to make better sets or sequences. The cards have to be next to each other in your hand for you to be able to play them. When you play a set of cards, you always take one of the cards already played back into your hand. Cards also have 2 values on them. As you add a card to your hand, you can create new sets and sequences. For example, if you have a 2, 4 and 5 in your hand, adding a 3 suddenly creates a sequence of 5 consecutive cards. Scout isn't just about outbidding the previous player. It's more about looking at what card from the ones they played will improve your hand and play accordingly. Seeing the potential of your hand and improving it over time is key. It's also more about not going over the top and leaving yourself with 2 or 3 useless cards. Scout is a really clever game that has some very simple rules that create a lot of depth. Mind you, I wouldn't necessarily recommend you start with Scout if you haven't played any ladder climbing games before. I fear there is another game that is probably a better introduction to the genre, as it has fewer rules, allowing you to get used to this genre before delving deeper. That game is Odin. It keeps it quite simple. On your turn, you either play the same number of cards that have previously been played or one more. So, on the very first turn, you play 1 card. The next player can then either also play a single card, or they can play 2, and so on. The cards you play have either to be all the same color or the same number. If you play cards with different numbers but the same color, you sort them from high to low. So if you're playing the 3 cards 6, 4 and 8, for example, you play them as 8, 6 and 4, making it 864. The next player can then either also play 3 cards, or they can play 4. Either way, they have to play cards that make a higher value than the one you just played. So they could play 999, 999, so 3 cards with the same number. Or they could play 921, so 3 cards with different numbers but of the same color. After you play a higher value, you have to take one of the cards played and discard the others. A bit like in Scout, it allows you to improve your hand and make higher value combinations. There are a few more rules, but that's basically all there is to it. It makes Odin a really good game to introduce people to ladder climbing games. In fact, Odin is such a solid game that you will enjoy it for a long time to come. It comes in a small box, making it easy to have on you at all times. It also takes up very little space on the table, so you can play it pretty much anywhere. The third ladder climbing game I want to talk about is the wonderful Sascha stack. It's sort of like Odin and Scout combined. You play sets of cards with the same number, but different colors. You add the numbers together to give you a total value. So 3 4s give you a stack value of 12. The next player then also has to play a stack with a value of 12 or a higher value. So they could play 4 3s or also 3 4s to match the previous stack. They could even play 2 6s. Alternatively, they could play 3 5s to make a stack value of 15. However, they can't just play any card. The top card of the current stack limits what the next player can play. They have to either play a card with the same number or the same color. So if the top card of the current stack is a yellow 4, then the next player can play a 4 of any color or a yellow card, plus of course other cards with the same value to match or outbid the current stack. If someone can't do that, the top card of the current stack gets returned to the player who played the stack, giving them 1 victory point. However, that means the stack value is now smaller, which makes it easier for the next player. The top card of the draw deck is also available to players to add to the cards they want to play, creating even more options. It sounds confusing and takes a little while to get into, but it's a lot of fun and is a unique twist on the ladder climbing genre that I've come across. It's certainly worth having a look at Sascha stack. So that's some examples of ladder climbing games and a brief introduction to the genre. Now I want to know if you've ever played any games like that. If so, what is your favorite game? Or maybe you've tried the genre but just didn't get on with it. As always, please share your thoughts and experiences on the blog at tabletopgamesblog.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you for listening to this Tabletop Games Blog topic discussion podcast. Please check the description below for links mentioned in this episode, as well as to the written version of this article on the blog. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, give us some stars or leave a review. Please also tell your friends about me, and if you want to offer financial support, check out my Patreon and Ko-fi pages, links to which you'll find in the blog at tabletopgamesblog.com. So thank you again for listening, and I hope to see you again soon.
This podcast was made possible by the generous help of my supporters. Royal Patron Sean Newman, Magic Champion John Risley, Castle Guards David Miller and James Naylor, Dice Masters Alex Bardi, Paul Grogan and Robin Kay, and Shining Lights Jacob Davis, Gavin Jones, Sarah Reed and Richard Simpson.